Jide had everything: money, power, women. He was the perfect playboy, spending recklessly and living fast. Love was just a game to him until the game changed. One decision. One bad investment. And suddenly, everyone turned their backs on him except an ordinary maid he barely noticed. But just when he realized he loved her, a secret was revealed. Ife wasn't who he thought she was. Jide must fight for his love the way he never did. Stay tuned till the end for this thrilling tale, and don't forget to subscribe to Savanna Storytime for more stories filled with drama, twists, and powerful life lessons. Jide lived the kind of life most young men could only dream of: fast cars, designer clothes, endless parties, and, of course, women. His penthouse in Lekki City was a bachelor's paradise, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows that gave a breathtaking view of the city. His feet were propped up on the glass coffee table, phone in hand, scrolling mindlessly through the messages from his girlfriends. "Baby, when are we traveling to Dubai?" "Jide, you forgot me." "No alert today." "I miss you." Face blowing a kiss. Across the couch, Toby, his best friend and the only sensible person in his circle, chuckled. "Guy, you know they tire. You spend money on babes that'll leave you if you ever go broke." Jide smirked. "Toby, you worry too much. Money no dey finish." Toby sighed. "Until it finishes." And just like clockwork, Ife walked in. She carried a tray of fresh juice, moving with quiet grace, her eyes lowered as she set it down on the table. She was beautiful, neat, simple, and almost invisible in this world of luxury. Dressed in a clean blue gown, her hair tied back in a bun, she looked nothing like the woman who hovered around Jide. Jide barely acknowledged her presence. She had been working here for 3 months, and yet, if someone asked him what she looked like, he wouldn't even be able to describe her. Toby, however, always had a kind word for her. He smiled at her now. "Ife, how are you?" She gave a small nod, her voice soft. "I'm fine, sir." She didn't linger. She never did. Just like that, she was gone again, back to wherever she usually disappeared to. Meanwhile, Jide's other friends entered and sat, their voices lowered like they were about to discuss some high-level business deal. "Jide, you waste your money on girls. Put 'em into this new investment. The cash out is crazy." At first, he waved them off. He wasn't stupid. He had heard about all these quick money scams before. But then he saw the figures. His guy had put in 1 million and gotten 4 million back in just 5 days. Jide sat up. Now they had his attention. The next morning, he invested. By the end of the week, his money had doubled. And that was it. He was hooked. The flashy lifestyle he already had. This would take it to another level. He poured in more. Took a loan. Even emptied his savings. Why not? Money no dey finish, as he'll always say. Until, one day, it did. Jide woke up to the sharp beeping of his phone. It wouldn't stop. Message after message poured in, each one sending a new wave of dread through his body. "Omo, the site don't crash. Everything is gone. No withdrawal." His breath caught in his throat. He threw off the blanket and grabbed his laptop, fingers trembling as he typed in the website's address. The screen loaded slowly, the spinning icon taunting him. Then, just as it finally appeared, error 404. Page not found. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He refreshed the page. Nothing. He opened his investment app. His balance, 0. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He reached for his phone and dialed one of his friends, the same one who had convinced him to put everything into the scheme. No answer. He called another. Straight to voicemail. He tried again and again, desperation clawing at his chest, but each number led to the same dead end. The group chat where they all once shared screenshots of their first cash outs had fallen silent. Jide stumbled back onto the couch, his mind spinning. Everything was gone. His savings, his loans, his investments. One by one, the people around him disappeared. His girlfriends, who once clung to him like perfume, stopped calling. The friends he had taken on vacations and showered with gifts suddenly had urgent matters to attend to. Even the ones he had helped start businesses ghosted him, as if he had never existed. Only Toby remained, but all he could offer was comfort. A week later, the house was unrecognizable. The once lively mansion had become eerily quiet. You could hardly find the luxurious gadgets and chandeliers, as Jide had sold them all to meet his basic needs. He sat on the couch, staring at nothing in particular. He glanced toward the kitchen and saw Ife as she wiped the counters and placed a pot on the stove. It didn't make sense to him. He stood up and walked towards the kitchen. "Ife, you should go," he muttered. His voice was low, drained of its usual arrogance. "I can't afford your salary right now." She turned, drying her hands on a kitchen towel, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled. "It's okay, Oga. I'm not ready to stay alone at home anyway. I like coming here, going to the market, talking with the women there, and watching the drama between you, your friends, and your girlfriends." Jide blinked, caught off guard. She spoke so lightly, as if his downfall was just another phase of life, not the disaster it felt like to him. Every other person had abandoned him. But Ife, the one person who had every reason to leave, stayed. He watched as she continued her routine. And more than that, she stocked the kitchen. Jide noticed the bag of rice, the fresh vegetables, the tubers of yam that hadn't been there before. He knew he hadn't bought them. He barely had money for himself, let alone to refill the house. She was buying food with her own money. Days passed, and Jide grew weaker. The loss of money was one thing, but the betrayal of those he had once trusted, that was the wound that refused to heal. One evening, he woke up to the smell of food. He had no appetite, but the scent of warm jollof rice and fried plantain drifted through the house, forcing him to get up. He dragged himself to the kitchen, and there she was again, stirring the pot, humming a tune under her breath. He leaned against the doorway, watching. For the first time, Jide realized something. Ife had been invisible to him, but she was the only one still standing by his side when everything else had fallen apart. For the first time in his life, Jide saw what love without conditions looked like. Jide focused more on his contract work. But things were different now. The flashy lifestyle was gone, and so were the endless parties. Work was slow at first but was shocked when Ife started referring big clients to him, people willing to pay well, people who trusted his skills without hesitation. It didn't make sense. Jide knew how hard it was to get clients, yet Ife somehow brought them effortlessly. Whenever he asked her how she managed it, she would smile and say, "My late parents' friends." Also, online sites. That was all. No further explanation, no bragging, no details. Jide's trust in women had been shattered after losing everything. But for the first time in his life, Jide felt something new. It was different, unfamiliar, and far deeper than the fleeting romances he once knew. His past relationships had been all about money, status, and appearances. But with Ife, everything was simple, no expensive dates, no designer gifts, no endless validation. Just companionship, laughter, and quiet moments that made him feel alive again. They spent their evenings watching movies, sometimes old Nollywood films that made Ife laugh until tears rolled down her cheeks. They read together, passing books back and forth, discussing stories, characters, and dreams. Ife had a way of seeing the world differently, and Jide found himself drawn to her mind just as much as her presence. When he wasn't working, they searched for jobs together. Jide had promised to help her find a well-paying job or establish a business once he cleared his debts. It was the least he could do for someone who had given him so much without expecting anything in return. He knew she was a graduate, but beyond that, she never spoke much about herself. Whenever he asked, she only gave vague answers. The only personal detail she openly shared was that her parents were dead. The night was cool, the Lagos sky dark but clear. They sat outside on the small balcony, the faint sounds of the city below mixed with the rustling of trees in the distance. Jide turned to her, watching the way the dim light reflected in her eyes. She looked peaceful, like she belonged nowhere else but in that moment. And suddenly, he knew. Without thinking, without doubt, he said it. "Ife, I love you." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Jide, don't joke with me." But he wasn't joking. "I'm serious," he said, his voice steady. "I don't want to lose you." For once, she had no words. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. But love wasn't the only battle Jide had to fight. The following day, Jide was excited to inform his mother. He sat on the edge of his bed as he listened to his mother's voice on the other end of the line. "You want to do what?" she shrieked. He sighed, "I want to marry Ife, Mama. She was there for me at my lowest point." "Of course, she did. You were a sinking ship, and she latched onto you because she knew you would rise again. Do you really think she stayed out of love?" "It was strategy, Jide. Women like her know how to play the long game." Jide closed his eyes, trying to keep his temper in check. "Mama, Ife never asked me for anything." His mother scoffed. "And you think that makes her different?" "That makes her smart, Jide. She played the part well. But let me make one thing clear, you will not marry her." Jide exhaled slowly. He knew his mother was stubborn, but this was his life, not hers. "I'm not asking for your permission," he said quietly. His mother's voice dropped, dangerously calm. "Then I will handle it myself." The call ended. Jide sighed, tossing the phone onto the bed. He didn't think she would actually do anything. But he was wrong. Later that day, Ife was wiping down the kitchen counter when she heard a knock at the door. She hesitated. Jide wasn't at home and expected no one. As she opened the door, her heart sank. Jide's mother wasted no time. She stepped into the house, slowly looking around. Then, her gaze settled on Ife. "So you have been feeding my son with love charm," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. Ife swallowed hard. "Ma, Jide's mother raised a hand, cutting her off. "You don't need to explain anything. I came here to tell you one thing. Leave my son. You think this is a fairy tale? That a maid like you can marry my son? You are beneath him." Ife felt something heavy settle in her chest. She wanted to fight back, to tell her that love had nothing to do with wealth. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Ife lowered her gaze. "Yes, Ma." Jide's mother smirked. "Good. Now, disappear from his life." Ife turned away, picking her bag from the kitchen and left. That evening, Jide walked into the house, stretching his shoulders. The day had been long, but he was looking forward to seeing Ife, to telling her that he didn't care what his mother thought. But the moment he stepped inside, he couldn't find her but a note sitting on the kitchen table. His hands trembled as he picked it up. "I'm sorry." That was all she wrote. Jide felt his chest tighten. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number. Switched off. He didn't know where she lived and tried everything he could to find her but failed. Days turned into weeks. Jide searched everywhere. And then, after a whole month of looking for her, he found an address. Jide stood at the tall iron gates, his heart pounding against his chest. The mansion before him was nothing like anything he had imagined, grand, elegant, and spread across acres of well-manicured land. He wiped the sweat off his forehead. Was this really the place? Was Ife here? She must be working as a maid here, he muttered. A uniformed gatekeeper stepped forward, eyeing him curiously. Good evening, sir. How may I help you? Jide hesitated before speaking. His voice felt dry in his throat. I'm looking for Ife, the girl who works here, he said, his own words sounding strange. The gatekeeper's eyes twitched with amusement. A low chuckle escaped his lips. Madam Ife. He tilted his head, as if trying to figure out if Jide was joking. Wait, who are you? Jide frowned. What was this man talking about? Before he could ask, the door to the mansion opened and then, she appeared. Ife stepped onto the compound, her long, flowing gown clung elegantly to her frame, nothing like the plain clothes she had worn while working in his house. Her hair was styled neatly. She was radiant and poised. Jide's breath caught in his throat. His mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. This was not the Ife he had left behind. Not the maid who had cooked his meals and cleaned his floors. She was more beautiful, graceful, powerful, rich. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. Ife, what is this? She met his gaze, her expression calm but unreadable. There was no hint of surprise, no hesitation. It was as if she had expected him to come. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer. Jide, she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of finality. I'll be bluntly honest with you. My full name is Ifeoluwa Adeyemi. Jide blinked. The name rang a bell, but he couldn't place it. She continued. My parents were wealthy. I inherited everything when they died. I only worked as a maid because I was running away from an arranged marriage by my grandfather. I wanted to live a simple life, even if just for a while. Jide's body felt numb. His mind spun in confusion, in disbelief. She had been rich all along. Overwhelmed, his knees buckled, and before he could stop himself, he dropped to the ground. I don't care about your money, he whispered. His voice cracked under the weight of his emotions. I love you. Ife slowly shook her head. I know, but I can't accept you, Jide. Her voice was steady but laced with sadness. Not without your mother's blessing. His heart shattered. Jide clenched his fist, his breathing unsteady. After everything, was she really going to let him go? Before he could say another word, she turned away, walking back into the grand mansion without looking back. And just like that, she was gone. The next morning, Jide brought his mother to the mansion as she stormed in, her gaily tied high like a queen making an important declaration. She wore her most expensive wrapper, the one she only brought out for special occasions, and gold jewelry that gleamed under the morning sun. Her perfume announced her arrival even before she stepped through the grand entrance. Ife was in the living room, seated on a plush white couch, sipping tea, when she heard the loud voice calling her name. She barely had time to set her cup down before Mama Jide burst in, her arms stretched wide, a beaming smile on her face as though all the insults and threats had never happened. Oh, my beautiful Ifeoluwa, she sang, her voice thick with forced excitement. She pulled Ife into a tight embrace, patting her back like a long-lost daughter. I knew from the beginning that you were a special girl. Don't mind all the things I said before. It was just to test you. Jide, who had been watching from the side, exchanged a knowing look with Ife. His lips twitched, holding back a laugh. Just a month before, This same woman had sworn on everything sacred that Ife was not fit to marry her son. Now, after discovering her true identity, she had turned into Ife's #1 supporter. Mama Jide spun around, adjusting her gele with dramatic enthusiasm. We must start planning the wedding immediately. Oh, Jide, you have good eyes, oh. Ife, my daughter, come let's talk. She grabbed Ife's hand, dragging her toward the dining table as if the wedding would take place that very morning. Jide just shook his head and chuckled. Life had a way of humbling people. His mother had once measured worth by wealth, but now, she was bending over backward to please the same woman she had tried to chase away. Life teaches in unexpected ways. The people who praise you when you're up may disappear when you're down, but only true love stays when there's nothing left. Jide had to lose everything to see what truly mattered. His mother had to face her own hypocrisy to accept what she once rejected. Real love isn't all about riches, it's about who believes you can make it when you have nothing. But what about you? Would you choose love if wealth wasn't in the picture? Would you stay with someone who had nothing to offer but loyalty? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to Savanna Storytime for more unforgettable lessons.